One of the questions we have to answer as dividend growth investors is, what do we do with our dividends? Do we spend them? Do we have them automatically reinvested in the stocks that paid them? Or do we accumulate them and invest them into other stocks based on how we want to invest them? Which option is the best? Well, if you want to hear my take on it, stay tuned. Hey guys, Kevin Burgess back again with another video. Today we're going to talk about whether to drip or not to drip. So what do we do with our dividends? Do we spend them? Do we have them automatically reinvested in the stock that paid it? Or do we have them reinvested based on our own criteria? Well, as in most cases in the investing world, the answer is it depends. So we're going to talk about these three options today and determine when it makes sense to use each of these. So our first option is we could use them to pay expenses. Now, in this particular case, if you are at retirement and you need your dividends to pay your living expenses, it is absolutely fine to spend your dividends. That's what you have your brokerage account for. That is why you're a dividend growth investor. By all means, spend those dividends because that is what they are there for. If you are not in retirement, I would highly suggest that you not spend your dividends. It is much more important, and we'll see this a little bit later, much more important for you to reinvest those dividends. Second, do we reinvest dividends automatically? A lot of people call this a DRIP program. I thought it would be helpful to tell you why they are called DRIPs. What's the history of these things? So originally, companies offered special DRIPs or dividend reinvestment programs that were either managed by the company themselves or they hired a third party like ComputerShare to actually manage the program for them. So the benefits of this is you didn't need a brokerage account to participate. You actually paid money into the company. The company set up an account for you, and then each quarter when they paid dividends, they would put additional shares into your account. There were low fees, and you were able to dollar cost average into this process, and you ended up with compounding returns because your dividends made more dividends, and then eventually they just grew in a compounding fashion. There's a couple of downsides to this. One is that there was a limitation on the ticker. So for instance, if you paid money into Microsoft, you couldn't turn that money and go buy Apple, for instance, because that money was actually sitting with Microsoft and it was in Microsoft's DRIP plan. The second limitation or the second downside was the share dilution. So instead of paying cash for dividends, these dividend reinvestment programs would actually issue more shares as dividends. So instead of giving you the dividends per share in cash, they would give you additional shares. In order to give you the additional shares, they would issue more shares. And the third downside was that there was no control over the timing. Now, believe it or not, these DRIP programs are still around. I found on ComputerShare's website that there's a lot of companies that still have these DRIP programs. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So this is the screen for ComputerShare. You see it's a direct stock investment program. You can pick your company over here. You can search for your company up here. You can pick particular industries. Some of them require initial investments of $25, some up to $500. Now let's take one company. I thought it would be interesting to look at Microsoft. And you can see that Microsoft has a plan with ComputerShare. There's a minimum investment of $250 if you're a new shareholder. You can see that there are fees here, though. The one-time investment or the recurring investment, every time you do it, it costs $2.50. Now, back in the old days, for companies to entice you to invest in these DRIP programs, they would give you a discount on the shares that you bought. But today, most of those discounts are gone. So why would we use these DRIP accounts today? I mean, they're still around, right? Why would we use those? The only thing that I can think of that makes sense is for maybe some of my international friends. In some of the discussions I've had, brokerage accounts may have higher fees overseas than they do here in the US. And if you can get investments in these DRIP accounts and the fees are lower than what you would pay at a brokerage account, might be worthwhile to look into if that's something that is of interest to you. So other than the value to non-US investors, I couldn't really think of a reason to invest in individual DRIP accounts because our brokerage accounts today have very low fees, if any fees at all. You're able to reinvest your dividends. You're able to use fractional shares. There's just not a real reason to go to these companies anymore that I can think of. So if you can think of any reasons out there, leave me a comment below, because I'd like to know if anybody uses these DRIP programs, and if you do, what's the value to you? What's the benefit? So I thought it'd be helpful to show you this as well. This is a couple of screenshots out of my brokerage account, and this is my dividend income account here. As you see, I've blocked out the account number, but you can see the first few shares in my dividend income account. But you can see that I can invest the dividends into the core account. It'll also, when I update it, and I did this for AT&T, I clicked on update, and it came out and said, hey, you can reinvest it in the security, or you can deposit it in your core account. If I reinvest it in the security, that means that it's going to buy for me the shares that paid the dividend. If it deposits to the core account, that means that it's going to put the cash into my brokerage account, and then I can do with it whatever I want. Okay, so the third option is to accumulate dividends and reinvest them manually. So the value of this is that you actually get to control the timing and even the shares that you buy with your dividends. So you get more control if you are actually accumulating and reinvesting those dividends. So yesterday I did a YouTube poll, and I got some responses from that. It's pretty interesting. So the poll asked, what do you do with your dividends? Do you spend them? Do you drip them? Do you accumulate them and reinvest them? And there were a couple of other options I gave there, but I thought it'd be interesting to show you the results of that poll. So as you can see here, the questions were, who automatically reinvests, who receives them and chooses where to reinvest them, who does a little bit of both. So I put an option in there that says I don't have dividend investments, but nobody who responded to this poll did not have dividend investments. So that's a great thing. And then I spend the cash received from dividends on consumables. The results came in that about 60% of you reinvest dividends, and you choose where that cash goes. There's about a third of you who actually let the DRIP happen, where you automatically reinvest it into the stock that paid the dividends. And there's a few of you that do both. And then we have a couple of people who said they're spending their dividends. My guess is they're spending them because they've retired already and they're using these funds for their living expenses. And I think that is awesome, and I give you guys kudos for that. I will be doing this at some point in the future, and likely pretty soon. So I mentioned earlier that it was important that we reinvest our dividends, especially when we're younger. I want to give you a sense for how important that is. Let's move to a website that's called dividendstocks.com. Now you see here, this is a website called dividendstocks.com. It has a DRIP dividend calculator. I thought what might be interesting is to take one of my portfolios. I decided to take my dividend growth portfolio and put in the balance, which is $542,305. It's got a current yield on cost of 2.84%. with a 5-year dividend CAGR of 10.6%. So let's put those figures in and see where this portfolio is going to grow over time. So you see over here on the left, you can do an investment type. It can be an individual stock or portfolio. Mine's a portfolio. The starting principal, as we saw, was $542,305. It happens to be in a non-taxable account for me. This is a quarterly distribution of dividends, and the annual dividend yield is 2.84%, which we saw the yield on cost earlier. Our 5-year CAGR is 10.6%. And I factored in here a share price increase of 5%. The last 30 years of the market is around a 9.9% return. So I'm thinking if I can get half of that, I would be okay with that. That's very conservative. And with those figures put into this model, this account grows from $542,305 to $3.6 million over a 20-year period of time. So not only are you getting the dividend distribution, you're reinvesting those dividends, and you're getting share price appreciation. So guys, hopefully that motivates you to stick a few extra dollars in the market, especially as we go through this downturn in the market. In the long run, you will be really happy that you did. So we talked about three options earlier. Which of the three makes sense? I would say that it depends. But if you're not retired, I would suggest that you reinvest your dividends in one of those two ways, whether it is automatically reinvested in the shares that paid you the dividend, or whether you decide where you're going to invest those dividends. It is really important. Hopefully that dividendstocks.com model shows the importance of reinvesting the dividends. And from my personal perspective, I would say it is not important how you reinvest the dividends. It is important that you reinvest your dividends. So that's my advice for you. I'm glad to be a part of this dividend investing community. We have a tight-knit group of folks who are here to help each other grow, and I'm really excited about being a part of this group. I'm glad you're here. And if you stayed with me for this long, if you wouldn't mind clicking that like button, if you felt that the content was worthwhile, and if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I'd love to have you along for the journey. And with all that being said, I will see you on the next video.